Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're grateful that so many have joined us today for this Sawtooth software webinar, creating a custom conjoint simulator in Excel. So hope you're excited for this. And just want to have a few slides here as far as an introduction, just some details here on the webinar. You're We have a Q&A section here at the bottom of Zoom that you can click on. Don't use the chat, use the Q&A, and there you can post your questions throughout the webinar. I'm joined with Dan Yardley and Keith Sean from Sawtooth Software, and Dan will of course be presenting, but Keith mostly, and maybe me a little bit, will help answer some of your questions during the webinar in the Q&A section. But then at the end, we'll have a dedicated time for Q&A. We will be sending out this recording to all those who registered for the webinar. And Dan also said he's willing to share his Excel document with everybody who registered. Just a brief introduction to Sawtooth Software. If you don't know who we are really good at a lot of things, including conjoint analysis, max diff. We just have general tools for doing general surveys. We're easy to use. If we don't say so ourselves, we're incredibly nice and have incredible support. And you can try us for free at discover.sawtoothsoftware.com. I want to introduce just briefly Keith Sean. Keith, if you could turn on your camera and explain to us a little bit about your consulting team.
Sure thing. So the consulting group in Sawtooth Software does projects for clients, basically whatever kind of projects our clients want to hire us to do. So that would include creating Excel simulators like Dan's going to show you, but also designing and analyzing and estimating utilities for the conjoint studies that precede them. Other kinds of choice experiments like max diff, situational choice experiments, and menu-based choice, all the things you'd expect from a software company that sells choice modeling software. But we also get involved in other kinds of research analytics for survey research. So we do all kinds of segmentation studies. We do driver analyses, predictive modeling, and the various kind of analytics involved in all different sorts of research. So you can call us for help with any of those things or write analytics@sawtoothsoftware.com, and we'll be glad to tell you what we can do for you. Thanks.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, Keith is extremely smart and has so much experience, as does Dan and their other team members. So be sure to consider them if you run into some issues and need some help. Okay, I'm going to introduce Dan Yardley here. Dan has been conducting and analyzing choice experiments for clients for over 20 years. He has experience in diverse fields like banking and mortgages. He helped lead marketing research at Merits and Gongos, and is now the senior decision science consultant here at Sawtooth Software, and works closely with Keith. So Dan, if you want to turn on your camera and share your screen and take it away, we're excited to have you. And just as a personal note, I love interacting with Dan. He is one friendly, happy guy. So take it away, Dan.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Justin. Stop sharing Justin's screen, share my screen. Okay, I'm really excited to be presenting this webinar. Let's see, can you see my screen yet there?
Yeah, we can see it. Looks good.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm happy to be sharing this webinar today. When I present in person, I usually like to start by telling a joke or something like that. But since this is over Zoom, I'll skip it because people say that I'm not remotely funny. We'll get started here. Here's a little introduction to this simulator that I'm putting together. I've created some fake data here based off of a fake survey, and this is what the survey would have looked like had we really presented it to real respondents. And we'll be talking about some widgets. Here I have 4 attributes with differing levels, and I'm showing 3 of this on the screen at a time. So the way I've got this laid out here is that I've got these white sheets, and these are going to be our ingredients that are going into our pie. And then these yellow sheets are going to be like our mixing bowl and oven. And then when we're all done, we'll pull out these blue sheets, and that's our final product. So kind of like on a cooking show as we're baking things along. So the beginning ingredients, we'll go to the label sheet here. So these here are, again, are my 4 attributes, and then the levels that I have of each. And these are the utilities that I got spit out of either Lighthouse Studio or Discover or some other product that you use to analyze. And then on my other component that we use in my building block, there's some segments, some data here. We got some segments and some weights that we're going to be incorporating in as well towards the end. So the one thing that I like to do is I like to make sure that my segments match up with my utilities, because that's, if I find that there's an error, that's a lot that happens frequently, is that I have these files merged up wrong. So the first thing I look at here is I have 595 respondents, but yet over here in this file I have 650. So obviously there's a mismatch. So there's a couple of ways that you can handle this. One is by doing a VLOOKUP. So I can do an equals VLOOKUP over here. Whoops. Okay, and this formula first asks me what my lookup value is, and that's going to be this respondent number over here. And then it's going to ask me what table or array am I going to look up this value of, and that's going to be over here. Put a comma. It'll be over here on my segment sheet, and I'm going to select all this. And fast way I like to select things by using Shift and then the Control and then arrow. So I put arrow down, arrow over, and that select that entire thing. And then I'm going to be copying this formula down. And so instead of a relative reference, I want to make this absolute. So I can come in here and then put $signs. But the fastest way to do that is by hitting F4. F4 will put $signs around those for you, and it'll toggle through where the $signs are. So that's a quick tip there, is use F4. And then it asks me, out of all that data, what column am I interested in? Well, I'm just going to go ahead and grab that first one, which is the respondent number. And then here's where it's crucial here at the end. The default for this function is true. That means you want an approximate match, but I don't want an approximate match. I want an exact match. So when you're using VLOOKUPs or their friend HLOOKUPs, make sure that you don't do an approximate match. You want to do an exact match. And so that will close out my, so I pick false. Then I'll close that out. And so it's saying, hey, this is NA. It's saying I couldn't find this respondent number 40. So I come over here to my segments, and they are sorted. So that's kind of, it helps. And yeah, there's no respondent ID number 40. So that's one of the respondents that I need to kick out. And then I can copy and paste this formula all the way down. There's a bunch of NAs at the bottom, a few scattered in between. So now it's like, okay, now how am I going to go through and pick out all these respondents? Another popular thing that I like to use is called the filter. So I'm going to select all this data, and I'm going to apply a filter. And then you go back up to the top, and you have these nice little drop-down boxes that filter your data. And I can just come through here and turn off all the NAs. And now I have only 595 of my 650 records. So that's a quick way to go through and just filter out your data. And also introduction on how to use VLOOKUP. It's a very important function if you've never used it before. But I'm also going to show you another faster way to do that same thing using advanced filters. So in advanced filters, you click on advanced filters, and it says, hey, this is your big thing of data. And then I can come in here and tell it what criteria I want. The secret with using advanced filters that the column names have to be the same. So in this instance, I'm going to use this respondent ID as my criteria. So then I come over here to the segments, and I want it to filter by finding only these respondents. And then I click OK. And then just like that, it found the 595 of the 650 respondents. So those are the respondents I want. So I'm going to take those, and we're going to put those into our mixing bowl over here on my calculation sheet. And there they are. Okay. So those are some quick tips. Again, the way I'm scrolling around in Excel, I'm using control and the arrows. I can move my thing all the way around. It's really fast. If I want to select things, I can use shift control. And some other tips is if I want to select entire row, I can do shift space bar. That does an entire row if I want to add rows. And I'm doing control plus to add in rows, control minus to delete rows. Same thing for columns, but it's a control space bar, selects the entire column, and plus and minus can add or delete. So there's a few little tips there. Okay, so now I've got my correct data in here in my tool. And so now some of the next steps that we want for the tool is that we want to create we eventually want our probabilities and preference shares. So I have this function up here that shows us how we can translate utilities into a preference. And that first step is to multiply each individual level utility, or if you have utilities on an aggregate level, you can do the same, is that we multiply our utilities by what we're choosing, and then you exponentiate that. And so here I just have some zeros and ones to tell what levels I want on or off. So for in this instance, these all have shape 1 turned on and medium turned on. So we can come through here and turn on different levels on and off. And you can see how that impacted my formula here. So again, sum product is a wonderful function in Excel. But what it does is it multiplies 2 arrays and then sums them together. So what this is essentially doing is I'm taking 0 times this and 1 times that -30 all the way across and then adding it all up. And then again, I'm using my absolute reference because I know that I want this to be stays in the same spot as I copy and paste it down. And then I'm exponentiating it to get this EUI. So that's for this number 1. Then I did a similar thing for my next alternative. I decided to go with 3 products or 3 alternatives because that's how many I showed in my survey. That's my typical go-to numbers. I usually like to have the simulator have the same number that it was shown in the experiment. And so then that's my alternative 2. Here's my third alternative. And then also I'm exponentiating my none utility here. And then I can just copy and paste all these down, fill it all out. Looking good. And then the next step here is I want the probability. So I'm taking this function here and I'm applying it to my preferences. So I've already got each of these set up. So now I just want to take that and then divide it by the sum of all of those. And again, I'm going in here and I'm hitting F4 to put the $signs around my functions. Just toggling through F4, and I want $signs around just the columns S and D like that. Then I can copy and paste that all over. Okay, so now I've got the probabilities of each respondent choosing each alternative. And then we can just average these up. Oops, I can spell. Fat fingers for disadvantage in typing. So there's the average probability of all these. So across all these 595 respondents, their average preference for this first product is 68%. So I like to do my simulators in 2 stages. I like to do the under the hood first, and then the GUI or the interactive part. And this here would be our preference for the none alternative. Okay, so there's the guts of a simple simulator. We've taken the utilities, and now we're spitting out our preference share. Okay, and we can come in here and turn different things on or off. If I wanted to change the price of this one to 105, for example, we could set that to a 1, put that to a 0. And if we wanted to raise the price of this one to a 90, we can change that to a 1, change that to a 0, and we can see how that permeates through to the results. Now we want to make it so that we can interact a little bit better with that. And so we can come over here to the, I like to have what's called a main tab that has like the user interface, and then my calculations tab, and then some controls under the hood as well. So now we'll come over here to this main tab, and we can start out by putting in our attributes. Put those in there. And then now we also already know what our preference is for each of our 3 alternatives. We want to do 3 alternatives. Alternative 1. And then if you grab these handles, they can do autofills. Fantastic little tool. So that's called alternative 1, 2, or 3, or I can do product. I can add product on the other tab. So I'll make it consistent. Product 1, product 2, and product 3. Okay. And then we can just link in our preference from the others. Calculations. And then we can't forget our none or other alternative. Okay, so we've got these preferences, and we can come through here and format this however we want. Put a nice percentage, increase or decrease the decimals however we need. Okay, so now we've got the results already, but now we need to be able to interact with these zeros and ones. We want to be able to put in different values more simply. Now, typically, I either like to do it one of 2 ways. One way is you can do it using data validation, or you can use it doing drop boxes. I personally prefer using drop boxes. That way I can link in macros or do other things as needed. If I want to do prohibitions and things like that, it can be more advanced. But we'll show you also how to do data validation. Looks like I already had some data validation hidden in there. So for doing it the data validation technique, what you need to do is you need to have your levels. So I'm going to take and I'm going to copy and paste these attributes and levels, put them over on our controls tab. And I just did Control C. And another tip that I could do is I paste value. I use a paste special a lot. And to invoke paste special, you do Alt E S. So I'm holding in the Alt button, then E, and then S, and it brings up this paste special option. And from here, I can just paste special. I can transpose. I can paste just values or paste formulas. And once you're in this dialog box, you can just hit what value you will need. I just hit the letter E because it's underlined here. So like that toggles that off. If I want to do formulas, I just hit the letter F, all values. You just hit the letter that's underlined is what you hit to do paste value. So I'm going to paste all. I'm going to transpose it. So now I've transposed my attributes and levels to be in this format. And then over here, I'm going to go to data validation. And I'm going to allow a list. So I'm going to force my user to choose from a list. And then the source of that list is going to be that controls. It's going to be that offer on. Okay, so now there's another reason why I like to use drop boxes is because you didn't know that you could interact with this cell at this time. So the user has to click on this, and then click on the box, and then click on what value they want. So now we have this on or off. And we can also copy and paste that as we need it to across the cells. So now we have this list that forces them to interact. Now we need to make sure that that is going on in our back end. So we can come over here. And so the way we would do that is, okay, if this equals off, right? Then we want a 1, otherwise we can put a 0. I'm actually going to copy that formula over, so I'm going to fix that column right there. Okay. All right, so it's on. So here's my formula right here. It's looking at this main cell right here. It's saying, okay, is this either on or off? And if it's on, it's going to put a 1 there. And if it's off, it's going to put a 0 there. And so now I can toggle off or on. And we can see the change in preference there. So it looks like the respondents prefer to have feature X turned on. So as we turn it off, the preference shares go down a lot. And so then we can do the similar for all the attributes and all the levels. It takes a little bit to set it up and get it going, but that's the gist of how you would set up using data validation. The other method that I like to use, again, is drop boxes, and that's done by you go to this developer tab here in Excel, and then you go to this insert. And there's 2 types of controls. You have forms controls and ActiveX controls. The ActiveX are quite more complex and use macros to control them and their colors and shapes and things like that, but they do have more controls. But I typically just like to use the built-in form controls. So here I'm going to use this combo box. But before I do the combo boxes, I know that combo boxes, they do have a certain height limitation. So I like to come in here and make sure my rows are big enough. And I think about 74 will be about the right size, just based on experience. So you come in here, give me a combo box. I'm gonna drop that in there. And similarly to creating the list with our data validation, we want to come in here and edit this control. I'm going to format control. Here we have to have an input range. And again, we can come over here to our controls and have that'd be our input. And we also, now it gives us a cell link, and we can assign this to be wherever we want. And I like to put that over here on the controls as well. And we'll just put it right up there above shape. Okay. And so now when I activate this box, I can pick one of the 3 shapes. I pick shape 1. So over here, this now changes to a 1. And I can change this to a 3 or a 2, and it changes to a 2. And now you can kind of see where this is going. We now have this drop-down box that we can toggle between 1, 2, or 3 for our shape. So now we can come over here to our calcs, and we put in a 1, 2, 3. And then similarly, we can just drop in a formula. We can do if our controls, and I'm just going to make that solid on the C. If that equals 1, then we want a 1, otherwise a 0. Okay, and then we're going to copy that formula over. And it was indeed a 2, so now we've got it up and running. So we can come over here to this main, and we can toggle between our different shapes. And we can see the impact the shape has on preference. Yeah, it's working great. Now you can come in here again. You can copy and paste this over, and now I've populated across all my products. And then when you come in here, you just need to change this to, instead of having that be linked to cell C2, I mean C1, I'm going to link it to C2, and then we'll select this other one, make this guy link to cell C3, like so. And so then over here on our controls, we can see that those are all populated and working now. So we can change. And now we need to go under the hood and tie these controls in to our products. Now I got that for the formula, so I can just copy and paste that down. And then it's always great to test all your functions and things when you're working. And so it's a 1, 2, and a 3, just like I have it on my main page. So that's all linked up and working fantastic. And so that's how you start to create the GUI, either using data validation or drop-down boxes. You can also come in here and use just a plain checkbox if you want to turn something on or off. You could theoretically use radio buttons, just have your levels all picked out, and then you can pick a radio button to pick which one you want. But these are spinners that allow you can increment or decrease different things. So those are two things that I like to do there. Another thing I like to do for attributes like price is to make it so that you can just stick in a value. So our price is ranging from $85 to $115. So we can set that up. So I'm going to make it so that the respondent can just come in here and type in a value. And I usually like to color code it a little bit different so that they know that they can go in and enter a value. So I like maybe make it bold or a little bit larger font, or you can make it even like a nice color green. And we can copy this formatting across. Again, use my paste special, and I'm just going to paste the formats T. There you go. So those formats are now propagated across. Okay, and so so right now we have our prices are in buckets like this. But a lot of times we want to be able to interpolate between the levels of a variable like this. So interpolation is good, extrapolation bad. We don't like to extrapolate out of the range of the things that we tested because we didn't test that. So I'm going to go ahead and put in some formulas for extrapolation, or sorry, for interpolation. So what I do is I like to work from left to right. So in this first cell here, as I interpolate, what I'm doing is I'm looking at my price. I'm going to link this to my price. So that's going to be my price on that main tab. Okay. And I can do that same for the others, but I can just do like what's called a transpose. It's going to flip the inputs. So I'm going to transpose these three price cells. And then you hit Shift Control Enter, and it populates all three. So now we can have our price in a column instead of in a row. And I'll just put in a couple of prices over here just for fun. Okay, so back to interpolating. So this first cell, I do the endpoints one certain way, and then the middle points I do the same, all have the same formula. So for this first cell here, what it does is it looks at the price and says, hey, if that price is larger than 90, we're going to have a 0. So I'm going to put in a 0 for that price, because that means the price is higher than that. And if the price is like say 86, I want it to take a percentage of this utility and a smaller percentage of that utility. So it'll be 20% of this, 20% of the 90, and then 80% of that. So what I do now is then I take the difference and I get the proportion there as that extrapolation. So now when I come and change the value to 86, it does just as what we needed. It makes it 80% for this column and 20% for that column. And that's a good little interpolation. And so then the formula for the other cells, it says, hey, if it's beyond my range, if it's beyond these ranges, make it 0. But if it's bigger than this middle value, I'm going to use that same formula. But if it's smaller, then I'm just going to do 1 minus that guy. And so then when we get to the end over here, it's just going to be 1 minus that guy if it's within the range. And so that's the way the interpolations are set up. So now we can come through and just enter in all different prices. And I also made my formula so that now I can just copy and drag those down. And so we see that 100 hits 100, 102. Yep, that's right between those two as well. So now our interpolations are all set up. So now the respondents can come over here and see the effect of price incrementally. So, hey, what happens if we drop our price by $1? The preference for our product now goes up. So we can drop it even further. Okay, that's good. Okay, and so that's the interpolation. The next thing I want to talk about is data cuts. So right now under the hood, we are just looking at the average across all the respondents. But that's not going to hold true if we want to look at some different data cuts. So what I want to do is I'm going to put in, I'll put in a column called segment, and I'll make it all ones for now. And then we're going to use our friend sum product to, instead of using average. So we're going to equal sum product of this row and this row of our segment. I'm going to make that an absolute reference. So I'm going to want to be able to copy and paste that across. And then we're going to divide that by the sum of our segments. Okay. And I need to make that absolute as well. So I'm copy and paste that over, and it stayed the same. So that means that's good. So now I can come in here and turn on or off whatever respondents I want. So I can come in here. If I don't like that respondent, I can turn them off. I can turn off a whole slew of them if I want. And I can see the impact on share and the preference. And now we can also even incorporate our weights. So let me go back over to our segments. Here's my columns of segments and weights. And I showed you earlier how we can do VLOOKUP to find those, match them up, but these are sorted and already matched up, ready to go. So I can just copy and paste these over under our calculations. Okay. So now if I wanted to put in segment 1, we can just copy in segment 1 and see its impact on preference. But that's the how it's going to work, but we need to be able to use that dynamically. So again, we can come over here and we can create a drop-down box. I'm just going to steal this drop-down box. We'll put it over here, call this segments. And then we need segment names. We'll put that under the controls. And also, we'll still want to look at it by total. So we'll call this all or total. Now we can adjust our drop-down box. Format the control. I'm going to come over here, make it be these. And then our control, we'll have it just be right up there. Okay. So now I can come through here and I have a drop-down box that has all my different segments in it. Okay, and that's being recorded what segment it is over here. 1 being all, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and such. And then from here, we can come back over to our controls. I'm going to add in a column for all. That's going to be a column of 1s. Okay. Now we can use what's called an index function. And I'm going to pull in this array. And what it does is going to go through and say, hey, which segment do I have selected? I'm going to put that value here. And that's going to be, I'm going to skip the row because it's all in the same row, and it's going to be column based on column 1. It's going to pull in column 1. All right, so it's going to look at it, pull in column 1. But again, I want to make sure that's absolute, so I'm going to put F4 around that. Then I can copy and paste that down. And now back on my controls, I can come over here and say, oh, hey, what's the impact on segment up? And we can see that this is now the same as segment up using our index function. Pretty slick. And now we can put in our weights. One way we can incorporate these weights is that instead of having these 1s here, we can have a 0.66. So what we can do is we can just copy all these. And I can do a paste special. And this time I'm just going to do a paste special multiply. And what it's going to do is going to multiply this by each. So 1 by 0.6. And so now it's propagated all of our weights across. And now it's all weighted. And I can Control Z to undo that. Sometimes I have clients that want me to put a checkbox. Hey, sometimes I might want to see it weighted. I might want to put it unweighted. So what I would do is I'd create a checkbox over here. Again, we go to developer, Add a nice little checkbox. And we can call this weights. And then we can turn the we turn the weights on or off. And if we want to do that, I'd create a separate column. And I would need my drop-down box to be my control. Let's put it over here on my controls. Okay, so now when I click on this weights button, it's going to either be true or false. Okay, so I'm going to move that over to here. Okay. Put a little happy weights right there. Okay. And then we've got our control here. It's going to be true or false. So now we can choose to either multiply that in or not. Okay. So we can do nice if statement. We're going to do multiply times if our controls is false, then we'll multiply by 1. Otherwise, we can just multiply it by our weight. And we need to fix that guy. All right. All right. And it looks like I have it backwards, right? So that's why I check. So if controls is true, yep. So I need this otherwise. So if it's true, I want the weights. If it's false. There we go. And that looks good. Okay, so now we can come back over here. Now we can turn weights on or off. We can change our segments. It's fantastic. And we can do similar things with checkboxes to turn these different products on or off if we want to turn a product on or off. Okay. And so that's weights, that's interpolation, data cuts. Another item that I've included in this final is a lot of clients like to see instead of preference, they like to see first choice. And so I can come under the hood. So this is the final product that you guys can look at and play with, or you can modify or experiment with. I go through and add in some first choice. So what first choice is doing is it looks at the maximum, your highest preference or your highest exponentiated utilities, and gives it all in. Says, okay, hey, that's the one that your utility has the maximum, so we're going to put it 100%. And so that's what this formula does here. And then I do another formula to break any ties. So in case the two are exactly the same, we break that tie by dividing by the sum of all those items selected. So that's what this does. So in the final product here, I'll show you a little bit about the final product. In the final product, I have preference and I have first choice. And I added a nice little graph. I got my drop-down box with the sample size. I went through over here and just summed up the sample sizes. So that changes dynamically. I use this little function. I use the ampersand to concatenate. And again, I use the index to look that up. Yeah, and so another thing here that I have in the final product is that I put some data validation on these, so that the respondents don't put in like $1 million. What happens? Because we don't want that. We want to force them to no extrapolation. So again, that would be under data validation. And what I did is I went through and I allowed decimals, and then between my minimum, which was $85, and my maximum was $115. And then I also had a little error alert. I put, hey, value out of range, please enter a value between 85 and 115. So if they come in here and enter, oh, hey, it's 0, it pops up this little pop-up box that tells us it's wrong. Okay. And let's see, I want to make sure we have lots of time for questions and answers. Make sure that I've hit all the main points. Oh yeah, so in this final product, I do have these check boxes at the top here. I can turn that off. And again, like Justin said, we're gonna send this out to everybody so you can have this and play around with this and learn as you will. And with that, I think that's pretty much all that I had for today, Justin. Another thing that we could do is from here is we could go and add in some macros. A lot of times I like to go in and add a macro that goes through and increments your price. Then you can see that way you don't have to manually go in and do price. You could write a macro that does that. But I think macros could be a topic for another webinar in the future that we go and do price sensitivities and things like that. So.
Great job, Dan. It's super hard to speak to an empty room, isn't it? You can't see.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going too fast, too slow.
Right.
I imagine
so
there's a wide variety of people's skill levels too back there. A lot of people are just like probably rolling their eyes, but
yeah. No, so I mean, for me, like, first of all, I didn't know Excel could do all this. And second of all, I didn't know how good you were at Excel. How did you get to this level of Excelness?
years of practice. I even challenged myself one day back in the early 2000s to not use my mouse at all, and so I went a whole day without even using my mouse just to learn shortcut keys and things like that. And that was a day of enlightenment for me. I still use those shortcut keys, so
it's impressive. I think for those that maybe you're going a little bit too fast for, you'll be able to get this recording and be able to slow it down and pause it so you can kind of think it through. Plus, Dan and Keith are around to answer questions, and we're going to share our email addresses at the end. You can continue to have questions and things like that. Dan, there's one question here by Purnima. She says, how do you handle prohibited combinations when building this?
Oh, okay, great question.
Let me just finish. So would that be handled automatically by share calculating as 0 since the combination would have no data? Question mark.
Yeah, so a lot of time you can go under the hood here and just change your formulas. Let's say, for example, if one of these is prohibited from another one, you can just say, hey, if that's a 1, then this has to be a 0. You can just edit it in your formulas. That's one way. But then the thing is, the respondent doesn't see that. So a lot of times what I like to do is I like to do it with macros. I'll go in and have a little macro so that if the respondent goes and picks shape 3 and, oh, hey, shape 3 is never low quality, the macro will change it away from low quality to something else. So again, that's another reason why I like to use drop boxes, so I can go through and record those macros and make those. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with macros, it's under the developer tab, and you can record a macro, and that's the great way to start. And you can hit Alt F11. Alt F11 opens up the Microsoft VBA, and that's where you can go through and edit your macro stuff. Again, we can do macros for another session.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Keith, feel free to turn on your camera and your mic and help me with this Q&A. You're much more savvy in this area. One anonymous attendee, Dan, said, the Dan Academy, like maybe we should start a new thing called the Dan Academy.
Great, thanks for the nice words.
See, I thought we had I know that there was another question. Alex had a question. What if you wanted to add cost to the options?
Oh, sure, cost. Yeah, so if you had cost, you would go under the hood here, and each of these items would have a cost associated with it, right? And so we go through and put out the cost. We can just make something up. Ran between, let's say it's between $5 and $10. And so those are our costs. And then you could just do the sum product of that guy and oops. and your configuration, and then it'll tell you what the cost is. I guess we wouldn't want costs for price, so we'd probably get rid of that. So anyway, you get the idea. So then call this cost. And then you could put that over here onto the final. Then you can have your cost show up, and then you can just do a price minus cost, and here that's roughly what the respondents are seeing. So.
Okay. I have a question before, if you want to, I could just interject one of my questions here to both Keith and Dan. So I know we have, built-in simulators into our software, right? When you have
Yes.
Lighthouse Studio or Discover, we have some built-in simulators. So maybe tell me some reasons why you would want a custom simulator and how it's been helpful as you've dealt with end clients.
Yeah, that's a great question. So with Discover, it's now online and it's fantastic. It has its built-in a simulator that it does. But a lot of times, the reason I would make a custom simulator is for like prohibitions, or if I wanted to add cost or extra little bells and whistles on the end, and make it more interactive for my user. But a lot of times we'll create the simulator here and then also create it in Discover or Lighthouse Studio and compare the results to make sure that, hey, oh yeah, everything's working correctly. So, and another feature from Lighthouse Studio is that it has its built-in simulator, and you can go in and export an Excel simulator, which is really slick. It'll give you a lot of the guts that are similar to what I've done under the hood. And that's a great starting point as well too if you're a Lighthouse Studio user.
And your clients have enjoyed interacting with these Excel simulators?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They love it. I mean, to me, the simulators is the end result of choice experiments.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the what ifs. You can come in here and play what ifs. You can set up your competitors. You can set up your product, play with your product, your heart's content, just to see, well, how would the choices be different if I change my product XYZ.
Mm-hmm. Keith, do you have any comments on that?
I just I wanted Kenneth Fairchild had a question. He said, "Do you run into any objections to macros?" He thinks he runs into a lot of problems with IT departments banning XLSM files, and so how do you get around that, or is it an issue?
Most clients I receive, I haven't seen that problem with the Excel macros. But certainly you can build Excel ones without macros. And like this one doesn't have any macros currently, so that's what we'll be sending out, is this one without any macros. And you can just write some more complex formulas and functions to get around having to use macros. But the macros do come in handy if you're, like I said, you want to do the price thing, or you wanted to loop through all your segments and things like that. So macros do make it a lot more powerful. So.
Mostly, I'm just seeing a lot of other questions about: Are we going to share the recording? Are we going to share the presentation? Are we going to share the Excels? And I think the answers Justin said is yes to all of that.
We will. You'll get anybody who registered for this webinar will receive a recording of the webinar. So this recording right now. Plus, you'll receive, I believe Dan is willing and would like to share this example simulator he's built in here in this webinar. So we will, yes.
Yeah. Another advantage of custom simulators is you can add in all kinds of images and your client's colors and make it look really nice.
Oh yeah, brand it for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can do a lot with Excel. I mean, you could you can make sure that you turn off the headings and the grid lines, turn off the formula bar, and you can get rid of your ribbon, and you can make it almost look like it's just its own thing.
There's a question here about, can we customize this simulator on Discover given some HTML, CSS knowledge? I would say not yet.
Oh, one thing that I did want to comment on is that I have my own custom tools here that I've made in Excel. I find myself frequently using this select objects. I can come through here and use it to select different objects. It's kind of buried. It's under like this. So instead of find and select and then select objects, I just created my own little buttons up here that I can use. And then the clear formats, I found myself, wanting to erase all my formats a lot. And so I did the same thing for that button. It's another tip. And then one fun thing that I found today, or just with putting this presentation together, is I wanted to be able to create this formula. And so what they had was you go under draw and it's ink to math. And then you can just write, I just wrote the formula here and then it just created it, for me. So that's kind of a cool thing. So some fun little features in Excel.
Nice. We have another.
One more question here. Could you please show how to embed the exponent or the scale factor in the simulator?
Oh, the exponent or scale factor. Yeah. So if you had like if it was on the individual level, you could just incorporate it on the individual level as a multiplier. Or a lot of times in the past, I've also gone under the hood here and adjusted the utilities. I mean, if we wanted to, we could multiply everything by a 2, right? Take this 2 and just paste values, multiply, right? So I'm paste values and multiplying. So now everything just got multiplied by 2 except for the none. But I don't know if that answers the question, but you can do that also on an individual level. Just change and again, you put a toggle, turn that on or off. Oh, I want the scale factor on, I want the scale factor off.
Great. And we have a question about practical limits to the simulator. Doug Malcolm asks, it seems like we can design an experiment that could be much more complex than the user could manage to handle in a simulator. Do you run into that problem at all?
Yeah, that's back in the day, I maxed out Excel. I had more rows than it had back in the day, but now that with the latest version of Excel, it's pretty slick. One thing that does happen is that if you have lots of complex formulas, it kind of slows things down. I used to use mmult, which is matrix multiplication here, but some products is a little bit faster when you get the larger, more complex things. So that's one turnaround. Another option that I've done is that I just have the first row be formulas, and then delete everything else, because formulas make it big, and so you delete all your formulas, and that makes the workbook smaller. And then when you want to update it, I write a macro that then populates all the formulas, updates the preference, and then deletes all the formulas again. So just kind of keep the simulator a little bit small. But that's definitely a limitation. But with technology, it's getting faster and faster, and we can have bigger and bigger files. So.
Great. Looks like there's one more question. Maybe Keith, you're answering that one.
Yes, I'll answer it.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we're towards the end. Let me share my screen real quick as a kind of a closing here. Just one more plug here to check out Keith and Dan. You've been able to meet them here if you didn't know them before. They're very knowledgeable, very smart. And they're just here, right? Our main business is software, selling software. But if you want some help, some hand holding, and you need some extra help, we got this team here that is ready to go. So please reach out, analytics@sawtoothsoftware.com, or call into our phone number. I believe Keith and Dan, you guys are willing to talk about things before you charge, kind of at a higher level. We kind of figure out what's going on, and then you'll give an estimate of what it would cost. Does that sound about right?
That's right. Well, we feel our prices are reasonable, and we can help out where we can. So
great. Yeah, just this last slide here, Dan, Keith, and my information. We really appreciate your time today. Hope you have a great day, and thanks for coming. See you later at a future webinar. Thanks, Dan. You did great.
Thanks. Bye.